um, get the show on the road. So yeah, today's webinar topic is really all about that, right? And it's how do we do more with potentially less budget, or even a tight budget that was already tight in the first place, right? Um, there are a lot of ways to be creative with security solutions. There's a lot of ways to do things without, immediately going over your budget. And that's really what we want to talk about. Stretching your budget without creating security holes or making major sacrifices. And um, we're going to do that with talking about one of the biggest driver of system cost here in 2025, and will definitely still be in 2026, is labor and installation cost. So if you're somebody who is getting an installation done, or even if you're potentially an installer that's on this webinar, you may be thinking of ways is how can I get my labor down so our quote's more competitive with maybe somebody else? And so we're going to be talking about how the different techniques you can use to reduce our labor costs on a quote. Um, the other side of that too is the time and effort it takes to find footage. We know that AI has totally revolutionized this in a very real way, and to be able to do it at a low cost, it seems almost a lot of people don't realize like how accessible AI is today and will go into 2026. And then we're going to talk about for those who have on-site security teams, or they're considering on-site security, or they're in that gap where they know they need some better protection but can't quite afford an on-site security tech, like what the options are there too. And then finally, we'll talk about system health and how that plays a role in budget and time, etc. So, for those who are new or don't know who SCW is, we are a value-driven company that provides end-to-end security solutions with free consultations. We can do either installation, or you can choose to provide your own installation team. Whatever works, we're very flexible. For those dealers or installers on the program, we also have a great dealer program that we can set you up with. And our kind of key point to fame, and what really brought us to the big picture, was our world-class US-based support team that when you buy our products, it's free, unlimited. So whether it's, hardware questions, or if you just need to know how to operate the system, that's all included. So that being said, let's start our first topic, which is reducing labor, not coverage. So when it comes to security installs, and this is going to have a lot of variations, right? In general, with us, our labor and install, um, when it comes to that cost, it's usually 2 to 3 times the actual equipment cost. Now, if you got very expensive equipment, it could even out a lot more. Or if you got very cheap equipment, it could be even less. So, the ratio of it anyway is generally 2 to 3 times as much as what your equipment is going to cost. And when people talk about labor and install, what is that actually covering? Well, again, it varies by who's quoting you and everything like that. But with us, it typically is going to involve, the labor to actually run that cable for the camera, the mounting, provisioning, the setting up, the materials for that, so the actual Cat 6 cable that we're going to run, etc. And it's the time involved in all that as well, of course. And labor has post-COVID significantly risen over the past 5 years. And the reality with that is, when we look at that 2 to 3 times the equipment cost, a lot of times, we're trying to get creative to reduce that additional cost there without reducing the coverage. And so we're going to talk about two different things. We're going to talk about the smart ways to reduce labor and the risky ways of potentially reducing labor cost. Let's hit up the risky one first, the less good stuff. The first one that I would highly not recommend is reducing your system coverage or system scope because of potentially labor costs, right? If you're in a situation where you need cameras or you need access control in an area, and you're considering, maybe we don't need a camera there, or maybe I can add a camera later on. That's usually the one that bites us the hardest, right? Because then, of course, you get an incident in front of that one, you don't have the footage, and depending on what it is, could be a safety, could be a liability thing. Lots of different things could go wrong in there, not to pull up the scare tactics. But we don't want to reduce coverage to reduce some labor. Um, Another key point too is eliminating features that you need. And I think that's the key point is what you plan to use and what you need. Um, we'll talk a little bit about AI and everything and how we can that can change your system and reduce the labor on the back end when we're searching for footage. But that's a feature that at its minimum doesn't cost a lot more or very much more with us. And I wouldn't recommend reducing that feature that if you know this could save me hours down the line, it's not worth saving, to reduce the features. So, but that being said, there's sometimes a lot of features out there that potentially could be overkill that you don't need. So, focus on the features that you need. Don't eliminate ones you need, eliminate ones you maybe don't think you're going to need. So, um, the other side of this too is, sacrificing the install quality. There are a lot of different ways to reduce the material costs. Like for example, not using conduit on outside exposed cabling. That's going to be cheaper, but eventually that cable is going to be damaged by either a person, animal, or the elements, and you're going to have to rerun that cable down the line. So that's a bad way of reducing the budget because it's going to eventually you're going to have to pay for that down the line. Those are the kind of bad ways of doing it. The smarter reductions that can really make a true impact on your budget without making bad sacrifices, I think are a couple things. The first thing is multi-sensor cameras. We're going to really dive into those and how that's been arguably maybe the biggest topic here in 2025 and probably going to be continue to be one of the biggest topics going into 2026. Strategic placement along with that. When multi-sensor cameras don't work in every application, so there's different cameras you can do to reduce the camera count without reducing the coverage count. And then again, like buying the proper feature set, the ones that you're going to use, not necessarily buying things that you don't need. So let's jump right into the multi-sensor cameras. And for those who are unfamiliar, what is a multi-sensor camera? Well, simply put, it's basically a camera with more than one camera in the housing. And they come in a lot of different shapes and forms. So you can see that this one right here is what we call a dual dome option. So within this housing, there are two independent domes that can be pointed in different directions. So that gives us a lot of flexibility in, say, a hallway, which we'll showcase in a little bit later. But there's a lot of different options within multi-sensors. Some of them have two like this. Some of them have four or even more sensors. And some of them even have PTZs built into them. And so, this is a general look at what a multi-sensor camera is. And so what is the big advantage when it comes to labor? Why is a multi-sensor camera potentially less expensive to run and have labor savings on versus multiple cameras in the same area? Well, the first thing is that with most multi-sensors and all of our multi-sensors, they only require one Ethernet cable run. So whether that's the one with the four cameras built into it or the one with two, you only need to run one um, cable to that camera, and that's going to be a huge advantage. So it's going to reduce the labor time on that. There's going to be so that's going to be great for any kind of net new installs, net new buildings. But it's also going to be great for retrofits, and we'll cover that in just a second too. And so when we look at that, the easiest way of looking at a multi-sensor camera is there are multiple cameras in one housing. And that's the power of one, as we say here, one cable run, one camera to mount, one configuration. There's only one switch port. A lot of times that when we're installing a security camera system at some facilities, they want to run it on, they're very expensive, but they love them, they're Cisco switches. And, if we can reduce the amount of ports we're taking up on their switches, that could be a savings of thousands of dollars just right there in terms of having to purchase new switches to maintain the security camera system. So that's a big thing. One IP address, and then it's one camera to service and maintain. And so it really simplifies the system and helps us reduce the amount of time we're doing to configure, mount, install the cameras. Here's an example of our um, multi-sensor in a floor plan over here. And this is in a kind of typical little looking warehouse. And you can see that we've got four lenses here. One of the two blue ones are at their widest angle, and they're just sort of giving us an overview of the aisles, the people coming in and out of these racks over here. And then on the other side, we've got the red ones, which are pointed more towards specific areas. So you can see one of them is pointed towards the inbound shipment area, and the other one is zoomed in even a little bit more to be pointed at the outbound shipping area. And this is all done with that one multi-sensor camera that allows us to only have to run one cable, mount one camera to this area to cover the vast majority of what this application needed. And here's another example. This is our dual dome option here. So this is the um, two camera option built into one. And you can see, in a hallway scenario, if you want to cover both ends of the hallway with really good effectiveness, a lot of times we put two cameras side by side. Well, this takes that another step further and just includes them in there. So we're able to see basically every point of this hallway with very good facial details, including even when it's a corner like over here. So, typical kind of use cases for these multi-sensors. As I mentioned before, there's a lot. The ancillary cost of running the major cost of say running a cable, mounting the cameras, getting the materials to mount those cameras, all add up to quite a bit. But there are, like I mentioned, ancillary costs to go along with it. The reduction of switches, the less real estate that's going to take up within a rack, um, the simplifying the cleaning and maintenance cycles for these cameras. If you only have to go up to clean four cameras in an area versus having to maybe do 16 to 18 cameras, that's going to make a big difference in terms of the time it takes to get to all those cameras. Now, for retrofits, this is where it gets even, I think, in some ways, just as interesting as a net new install. So, with retrofits, one of the big things that people have when they're looking to improve their security camera system they already have is they often feel like they have blind spots that they need to cover, that they want to cover in the most effective way, low cost way possible. And a multi-sensor is a great way of doing that. So if you already have an existing camera there and you go, man, I really wish I could see behind here as well, or I need some more coverage in this area, you can replace your existing camera with a multi-sensor camera, and that's going to get you anywhere between two extra views or four extra views depending on which model you go with. Um, and in a lot of cases, especially if you have an old camera system, these newer ones are going to have higher resolution, better clarity, and they're going to also potentially add AI to your system as well, depending on what kind of NVR you got and everything like that. But they're going to be smarter cameras than the ones you currently have. So I'm going to breeze through a little bit of our offering specifically on the multi-sensor side. I will mention as well that if you are interested in these and you want to figure out, hey, what option works best for mine, feel free to reach out to one of our security experts. They can give you no obligation consultation, build out a floor plan with you, and see kind of what options are exist there for specifically for you. As I mentioned before, we have one that's two 4 megapixel domes. They're independently positionable, which makes them great for your hallway situations. We use these a lot in schools, hospitals, hotels, office spaces. Um, but you can also use them for multi-point as well. So, for example, this is it in a hallway, which is sort of the natural place we typically look for these. And you can see that as I walk down this end, and yeah, it switches to the other one over here. And I'll just do that one more time so you can see that we've covered this entire hallway with one cable run and one camera mount. Here's another example. This one's mounted more so in the middle of the hallway, and we got it installed in what's known as corridor mode, and so that allows us to get a better look at what's going on up and down rather than left and right, which is kind of nice for a hallway. So you'll be able to see that not only are we covering the entire hallway, but there's basically no gap at all between these. There's actually a decent amount of overlap if I go back and show you that. So you can see that we've got overlap between the two cameras. So at any point, anybody in this hallway is going to be able to be, known where they are. and where they're going. And then the last side is, obviously multi-point where we're pointing in different directions is great, but sometimes we also install these where we're getting, um, we're just doing left to right. And that's going to get us about 196 degrees of field of view, which can be great for exteriors, large rooms, something like this, where in this big conference room over here, we've got one that's pointed towards the entrance and the other one that's pointed the other side of the room. And this gets us very good clarity in this room with that one cable as well. The next option is the four lens multi-sensor. So, this is the same concept. It still only requires the one cable, but every single one of them is adjustable. So we can both move them on a rail like this physically, and you can see that we can position them so if they're on a corner or they're attached to a wall mount, like you can see here in this image, that gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of where we can point certain things. So if it's in like a manufacturing plant, we can get general coverage of the manufacturing floor while also potentially zooming in on key components or materials as well. And again, that's that one we looked at a little bit earlier in that application. You can see you can also drop mount it as well. So you can mount it from a ceiling if you want to. They're very flexible. And like I mentioned, middle of a room, like we had in that example, corners of buildings are very, very popular. Lobbies, manufacturing, etc. Here's another example of one that's here as well. So you can see that this is in an office space. This is our office space, and it's covering the entire office space with a lot of clarity. We got a lot of flexibility. So like the one on the bottom right down here is zoomed in to the exit door there. So we want to pay a special attention to that. We can do that. So it gives us a lot of flexibility when we're mounting and installing these cameras. The last option I want to bring up that's within this realm, but they're not technically multi-sensor cameras, are either ultra wide or fisheye cameras. I won't go into crazy detail on these at the moment, but they do make sense in a lot of applications as well. For example, we have one camera that has a 180-degree field of view, which typically is going to cover anywhere between 68 to 80% more area than a 2.8 to 4 millimeter typical wide angle camera. Um, and so that might be another option for us to use that. Maybe in that conference room, we may want to use those instead of a multi-sensor. And then fisheyes are very similar in that regard too. We may consider those depending on who's watching them live, what the clarity level, because the nice thing about the multi-sensor or the ultra wides and the fisheyes compared to the multi-sensor is that they do only require one channel on the NVR2, so there could be some savings from that as well. So, point being is that if you're in if you're in this situation and you're looking to figure out which one is working best for you, definitely reach out to us. And in fact, we did have a webinar on multi-sensor cameras earlier this year, and we did kind of go into more detail on fisheyes versus multi-sensor and when to use when to use one, when to use the other. So definitely, if you're interested, you can look at that as well. And that's kind of the quick look at the multi-sensor. As I go through this again, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in that Q&A section, and I'll be happy to answer it as it makes sense. But so the next thing we wanted to talk about is adding intelligence. And when we think about reducing budget, we don't always think about like adding sometimes, right? It's usually subtracting or reducing, as it kind of makes sense, right? Um, but sometimes the cost of you know lowering the budget and different situations, if you can't find the footage, let me put it in a more specific way, I guess. If you can't find the footage that you install for your security camera system, how useful is that security camera system for you? And that's where adding intelligence can make a big difference, not just in finding the footage, but also doing it in an effective way. So instead of spending half a day scrubbing through footage, you can do something that used to take half a day in 5 to 10 minutes. And that allows you to free up your teams, whether that's the IT team that had to pull the footage or somebody else. And that's where adding intelligence comes in. So people who are on older systems out there are most likely on what we call pixel-based motion systems. If you want to know if you're on a pixel-based motion system, if you got if you look at your cameras and you got a bunch of motion detections because bugs were in the view or because it was raining or snowing and it says it's a motion detection, that's because it's pixel-based motion. It's very simple, not a lot of intelligence there. Um, and the new way of doing this is what we call object detection. So what that allows it to do is detect specifically whether that's a person or a vehicle in the image or other objects potentially, but usually people and vehicles, and then specifically call those out and make it more searchable for you. Um, and so the key thing is now is just a couple years ago when we talked about having people in vehicles, that was something that required potentially a cloud subscription fee, a expensive server, something like that in order to get that analytic. Nowadays, that's very accessible. Basically, all of our cameras have built-in AI to be able to detect if that's a person or vehicle accurately and effectively. And there's no additional charges or fees to actually do that. Um, and so what that kind of can look like here is that you can go into our software and do a search like this and say, hey, I want to see all the people who have come into this camera's view today or the last hour or last 5 days, whatever you want to search. And it gives you a much more effective look at what's going on. I can easily see thumbnails, I can play the video. I don't have to sit there and scrub through footage or fast forward or hope I find it. It takes literally minutes what used to take me hours. Here's the same kind of search results with a vehicle search. So you can specify if you want to see people or vehicles. And, it can go even steps further too. Like we actually have cameras now that can also specifically search for colors of vehicles or colors of shirts. So if we're searching for somebody like this red K car over here, we could put in red and then search for all specifically red cars, which then cuts down your time as well. Now, this all sounds great, but it also sounds maybe expensive to somebody if you're talking about maybe replacing cameras or replacing maybe head-end units. Um, but the key point is and what we recommend, especially again for the retrofits or is that, you know, replace or relocate AI cameras to your key areas, right? The entranceways, the high volume areas, the places where maybe you get deliveries or there's high valued items or storage or anywhere there's safety involved, dangerous manufacturing floors. We want to start there and upgrade where it makes the most sense, where it's going to make the most effectiveness possible. You don't necessarily need to jump to upgrade to say a one a, a back end storage room that maybe one or two people go in a day. You're probably okay in that application. It's more about the high volume where we can potentially make a massive impact with just upgrading a couple of cameras. And nice thing about that too is let's just say we do have a couple more areas we want to install cameras. We could potentially still use those older cameras in other areas that are less, um, less I guess traverse is a way of putting it. And speaking of the that analytic, another one that's come out this year, in fact, it's only about 4 to 5 months old now, is a new feature that we have that's called TraceSearch. And it's interesting. Every organization's a little different when it comes to actually finding footage or, doing incident research and actually doing an incident poll and getting all the footage. Sometimes that falls under HR, sometimes that falls under the IT, sometimes that falls under Steve because he messed with the system once and now he's kind of the guy who deals with it, right? It all depends on the organization, but the reality is that time is money, right? Like if your IT is stuck there having to spend half their day looking for footage and exporting footage and uploading it to Google Drive for HR, that's wasted time that they could be doing, a more effective role in terms of their actual IT day-to-day job. And so what Trace Search allows us to do is not just find people and vehicles, but help find us specific people and vehicles that went across the facility. So it looks a little bit something like this, where we can draw a box around the person, and then what it does is it searches all the rest of the cameras for when somebody like in that description went in front of those other cameras. So we'll see the results here. And you can see that, it's found her all across the other cameras at our facility. And so that's just going to make it, and you can export all of them right there, as I should say. And you can see over here, we can also put them in chronographic order. So we can see as she's coming in for the first time, walking through the office space. And this is now going through, I believe, about 8 to 10 cameras that she's walked in front of, walking back outside, and eventually back to her car, it looks like. And so for somebody to go and pull 8 to 10 cameras of that footage, it easily could be half a day of doing that. And so this allows you to search, export, and do all that stuff in minutes. And we can go into more details in terms of like if you give us a call. This would require cameras with built-in analytics and a supported NVR. But, if you are somebody who is doing incident reports very frequently, this could be something that is going to save you a ton of time. Um, and that time is going to eventually become money. And great thing about this feature is there's no reoccurring or subscription fees with it. So once you own the actual hardware, it's yours to do forever. So that's kind of the AI component. And without throwing out specific numbers, some of our cameras now that, are 260 bucks can now do AI built into them. And so that makes it a lot more accessible than it was just a couple years ago. So if you're on the fence, if you think, man, I could really use one or two of them in a certain area, or hey, all this sounds really good, I really want to upgrade everything to get that trace search feature, let us know. It's a lot more accessible than what it was just a couple years ago to get these kind of groundbreaking features. So the other side of the budget conversation is when it comes to on-site security. There are a lot of facilities that rely on on-site security, um, and specifically security guards. And security guards are essential to the facilities that have them, right? They need to respond in real time to a potential threat, escort people in and out of the buildings, do security walkthroughs. That's a big thing of just checking, hey, is everything here? Is everything looking okay? We don't have any broken windows, anything like that. Um, but they can be an expensive asset, right? And not every company can justify the expense, even if they want some of those benefits. And these are the common scenarios that our clients approach us with. They would like protection, especially after hours, but on-site security is completely out of the budget. Like this is not an organization that can justify having a full-time position there or multiple full-time positions to protect what's there, right? But they do want some of that on-site protection kind of best of both worlds, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Sometimes we also have people who have a security guard or security team sometimes, but they don't feel like they're being used effectively. Like maybe they're that maybe they don't know how to use the camera system effectively, or they're just unhappy with the overall thing that they're dealing with. And then sometimes they have guards, but maybe they realize like, having one guard is not enough in this situation, and we might have to consider adding another person to it. Is there something we can do in between that? And those are the common scenarios that we have when it comes to on-site security. And so our answer to this typically for almost all three of those is what we call professional remote guarding. So in a simple kind of way, this monitors your cameras for events. So we just talked a lot about how AI and these detections and all that. Well, that's made what we call remote guarding a lot more feasible. So what happens when they detect a person or a vehicle in a time when the system is armed? They'll sit there, watch your camera, make sure that this person is not a threat, that they're okay. And then if it is a threat, they can do things like dispatch police. They can call your local guards that exist there if you do have guards on location. They can also perform two-way audio warnings and what we call talk downs to let them know that, hey, you're on camera, and specifically, hey, you in the blue shirt, you're on camera, get away from that car, or we're calling the police. And that can effectively protect the assets a lot more effectively than potentially a guard that's doing a walkthrough. And the nice thing about this product too is that it's extremely flexible, right? We can decide to monitor just a couple cameras at the facility at key areas, maybe again, key materials. If you're a car dealership, maybe your expensive cars up front, etc. And then it's also we have flexible schedule options. So whether you just need overnight coverage or you need somebody that's like 24/7. Maybe if you're closed on the weekend, you want that coverage to happen on the weekend. We can work with that. We can work within your schedule. They're also all UL listed, US based monitoring station that we partner with. And again, this is a customizable option. So when we say it's a remote guard, we really kind of push that, right? So we have some clients that specifically, hey, when Steve comes in, he's okay. Don't worry about Steve. He drives a 2008 Ford F-150 blue. Don't worry about Steve. He's gonna come in at 2 a.m. if he wants to. Um, so you can tell us your needs and we can customize a solution that works within it. And as I mentioned, the response when they do detect a threat could be a talk down, a police dispatch, and one thing about the police dispatch too is that because this is a verified live alarm, it generally gets a quicker response from police. So they'll dispatch and have the dispatch on the phone to let them know what's going on, what the updates are. So it's a lot more effective than a non-live uh, alarm. And again, if you do have local guards or maybe even a guard service that you partner with, some of our clients actually have, where they do like a paid walkthrough twice a night or something like that. They can also call them to let them know to go on location as well. And along with that, of course, you have incident reports and call trees. So, somebody who needs to know can get that as soon as possible. So for those with the budget for a full-time security team, remote guarding can help bridge the gap and make those guards more effective because it really gives them eyes in the sky. So, hey, there's some guy out in the parking lot right now that's checking cars. We're not we don't we think they're a threat. Do you want us to call the police? Do you want to check it out? It allows those guards to because if a guard's checking something out, they can't necessarily watch the cameras too. We all can multitask as much as we want to try, but the remote guarding really acts as their eyes when it comes to the cameras. So it makes their on-site security more effective, which may mean that, hey, if you're thinking, hey, maybe I need two guards or three guards now, adding the remote guarding service may allow you to keep that one guard, two guards, or whatever, without having to expand that team yet. Another thing I want to mention too, just in general, when it comes to remote guarding, and especially if you're comparing it to maybe like other services out there, it may not be immediately apparent if especially if you don't currently have any security on site, what that cost savings is. We do have a calculator on our website that I believe will be in the email that you can kind of do to kind of see what the difference is. Um, but I do want to mention like that sometimes, and for some of our clients, right, we've had car dealerships that have $80,000 cars that were stolen that that then get the service and hopefully prevent that in the future because all it takes is one or two bad incidents for remote guarding's total cost of ownership over that year, maybe even one, like less than that, honestly, to really be worth it. So definitely look into that if you're in that application, even if you don't currently have a security team there, but you want those benefits. Car dealerships are very typical for that. And the last thing we'll talk about here is system health. And this is a place where we see sort of when budgets do get cut, when teams get kind of smaller, or maybe they don't get the expansion they were hoping for, where this can sort of fall into the cracks, right? Who's responsible for the security camera system? Um, Sometimes IT's in the initial stages, and then they want to pass that system off to, the maintenance teams, or, to keep track of what's going on with it. And I was actually just talking to a client, that is a potential client, I should say, that currently operates cameras within their gym, and um, it was a big part of them for us to provide system health checks because they had an incident where somebody messed something up, they didn't use the equipment right, got injured, and now they're fighting a lawsuit, and they don't have the camera feed because it turns out that camera was down for 6 months before they even noticed. So they didn't have the footage that they thought they had that probably would exonerate them in this case, and now there's a massive cost to it. So system health is just, again, one of those things that's kind of easy to think about or push off, but it's as important as, any system is only as effective, no matter how expensive it is, as how well it's performing. Um, and so even if that camera wasn't specifically down, there's situations where like spider webs get in front of it, or maybe the camera got loose a little bit and now instead of it's angled downwards. So these allow system health, and doing system health checks is a vital way of making sure that when you do have an incident, or hopefully you don't, but when you do have an incident, um, that you have the footage you need to effectively, exonerate, or, fight a case. So, this is especially true for like large systems, and even more so, I think, for multi-location. When you're a multi-location franchise, that has locations all throughout, states, different managers at different locations, this can be really hard to keep track of. Um, and so, what we can do for that, there's two things that you can do for it, I should say. The first thing is, we have guides and everything, and checklists and stuff that you can use to do your own system health checks. And we recommend doing that on a fairly regular basis, right? That also includes doing things like setting up alerts for if a camera goes down, to make sure that you have alerts. If your hard drive has issues, make sure it alerts you. The system automatically will do that stuff for you. You have to set it up first, but once you set it up, that's a big thing to do. Um, Another thing that we can do is SEW itself, we can also provide either a one-time system health check, which kind of just makes sure, hey, we haven't checked this for quite a while. Can you just make sure everything looks good and get us started? And we're happy to do that. We can also do it on a regular basis as well, whether that's quarterly, monthly, bi-monthly, whatever. We can do it at whatever interval you need. Um, and that's going to free up your IT team, because that's usually the IT team that's going to have to go in and check these things. And if they're working on upgrading a server, or, moving away from Windows 10 to on their systems, like these things are probably a better use of their time than checking your camera system on that regular basis. So this can help reduce your labor cost and make your system more effective. And with that, that's actually our last section of this webinar. Um, if we do have any questions, feel free to put them in now. Otherwise, that's kind of the conclusion of this one. Dylan, anything else you want to add in terms of like the follow-up and stuff that's coming in?
Not much. It was good. Good. Learned a lot as always. But yeah, we're gonna be sending out the recording right after this, along with links to help for resources on everything we talked about. And yeah, get in touch if we can help.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll just give it a minute or two to see if any questions fill in here. And if not, you always can feel free to reach out to us after as well if you prefer that. And um, do have a couple questions that came in here. Do the camera description on the website say what features require certain NVR? So we do have a page on our website that does cover a little bit of that. So the two ones that I specifically talked about, the people and vehicle search, and then the trace search feature, um, are available right here on our website. So this will tell you specifically which NVR support trace search, and you'll see that down here. And then this will also tell you what cameras can work with that trace search feature, along with doing the people and vehicle detection. Um, so essentially all of our cameras now, there's two or three exceptions out there, but most of our cameras can do people in vehicle search and then are compatible with trace search as well. So once you have the NVR that can do trace search, and you have the AI cameras, that's all you need. You also, again, like I mentioned, you don't have to necessarily upgrade all your cameras if you do have a current system. So if you have a lot of overlapping coverage and you only want AI in certain parts, you can upgrade just some of the cameras, and then in the trace search results, you'd only see those AI cameras, but it does give you some flexibility there. And if you do have an older NVR with us, or an older NVR period, you can definitely reach out to us, and we can give you a more specific idea on maybe what you can expect out of that NVR, or if it's maybe better to upgrade at the moment.
I'll throw those links
We'll
in
give
that
it
recap email as well.
perfect. Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. And we'll give it maybe just one more minute here for any questions. But again, feel free to reach out to us with any additional questions. I hope um, everyone has a great Christmas and holiday season, and New Year's coming up. So it's getting closer, and end of the 2025 going into 2026. Can't really believe it. It's been such a quick year, but I appreciate everyone joining us on these webinars. If this is your first time, welcome aboard. If you've been to maybe the other 10 or 12 that we've done this year, appreciate you joining in on all of them. And if any questions come up, or if you have any ideas on, hey, it would be great to learn more about this, we're always open for webinar topics. We try to do one once a month, so we'll be doing another one sometime in January. So keep an eye out for that. But otherwise, I think it's a good time stopping point here, and I appreciate everybody's attendance. So, Dylan, anything else before we jump off?
No, it's great as always, James, master of webinars.
I guess so. Yeah. Appreciate it. But thank you guys. Have a great rest of your day.
See you guys. Bye.